going to start this off with, this is actually going to be more of a modern server management versus Azure Arc Part 2. That does tie into this presentation, but really after doing the session that I did at MMS to talk about Azure Arc and talking with folks on Twitter and in person, just realized that there were a lot of areas of opportunity where people were struggling with, well, how do I manage servers in the cloud? So great, we've got them in Azure Arc, and now we can start patching with Azure Update Management Center. That's awesome. But now what do I do with third-party apps? What do I do with configurations? Like, this isn't enough to get me off of Config Manager. And so in order to continue working towards that cloud native path, I really felt that talking about how we could manage apps, how we could manage servers, it was really going to be the way to continue moving all of us forward. And it also solved my own personal management issues during my day job. So I did write a blog all about everything that I'm going to talk about today, so that way you can reference it later. All of the links, screenshots, etc., are in that blog, but I'm a systems engineer by day, and now I am posting all about Microsoft now. All right. So speaking back to barriers that everyone kept bringing up to me, was really third-party apps was something that I consistently heard about. But then when I would ask questions of, okay, well, what could we do to start getting you in the cloud? Like, what about other solutions? And very regularly, I heard barriers of individuals being really overwhelmed by their day-to-day job of, well, there's so many options, like there's JFrog and there's Nexus, and there's all of these like new names that most of us are not familiar with. How do I even know if this is going to be the right solution for me? Or there's a skills gap. I'm not a DevOps engineer. I don't know Linux or Python or any of this. I just have PowerShell. I don't want to have to start all over again. I don't want to have to build new skills while I'm really just trying to manage my own fleet. And then there's also the fear of, okay, so I do learn this new skill. Now what do I do if this solution doesn't actually work? I had to sell it to my boss in the business, and how do I actually get it to give the return on investment that I sold? And then if you're on a small team and you don't have anybody else who's really backing you up, and you have, thousands of machines that you have to manage, maybe you have a server 2012 R2 and trying to get those migrations going. That's really, I just wanted to bring up that those are very real barriers that I think a lot of us can relate to. And so how does one go about finding a solution that can kind of address all of those barriers? So Ansible. I didn't know about Ansible until last year. There is one of my really good friends and a senior engineer on my team. He's kept throwing around names like Ansible, JFrog, Chocolatey, all of it. I was like, you're making this stuff up. This isn't real. And but then he showed me how he had set it up. And really, the big selling point about Ansible is that it's open source and it's agentless. So you're not adding any complexity to your environment. So if you already have, other services in your environment like CrowdStrike, this isn't going to add to issues. And then it's the approach of management is it's declarative. So you're going to have the end state in mind. So say, for instance, I felt this was a really great example. This was from Ansible's documentation. Instead of giving an exact step, you're going to say, put me in California. Those steps are going to be different if you are already in California versus if you're in Seattle. If you're in Seattle, it's going to say, order an Uber, then get in the Uber, get off at SeaTac at this terminal, et cetera. But if you're already in California, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to skip right past you. So that makes it really helpful when you're trying to create dynamic and scalable configurations. Also, it's agentless. I don't know if anybody noticed, but this is a big selling point for me. And then infrastructure as code. Really, I just added this so that way we'd add another fun buzzword that everyone's talking about. And then also, if you like bullet points that aren't in odd numbers. But I did add one more. So anyway, All right, so ignoring Ansible. I will say at first blush, I don't have any background in Linux. I don't have any background in Python. I've been purely a Windows shop this entire time. And so it was really intimidating of, okay, so I'm supposed to be using this thing that is super high powered, really scalable, lightweight, but it feels very DevOpsy. And how am I going to actually go about learning this? I don't know if you've tried to find documentation about Ansible. The Ansible documentation itself is great, but if you've had no exposure to Linux, it can be a little overwhelming. So I was put together just really quickly some key terms. It's all from Ansible's documentation. Their documentation is really great, but essentially a task is just an action that's going to be run on a host. Super simple. And then a play is just mapping a set of hosts to a task. So it's rather than just running one single command, it's going to be a shorter list. And then you can build a playbook, and a playbook is going to have like multi-steps. You can use it for configuring really anything. A thing that I specifically like about a playbook is you can run any language in it. So if you call to a PowerShell script, like say you have the file, it'll run that. So you can refactor all of your PowerShell scripts. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's really going to save you time. So while you're learning this new skill, you still get to use everything that you know that already works. And then hosts, those are just going to be remote machines. And then inventories are a group of hosts. That's going to be similar to like a collection, device collection and config manager, or a device Intune device group. The really cool thing about this that I'm not going to go into as deeply in this specific session is how inventories can actually be dynamic, where they can update in real time while you're running a playbook. So it really saves you a ton of time and makes it so much more scalable when you're running huge playbooks against, thousands of machines. And so the real question when I first saw Ansible was, all right, well, how do I even get started with this? I don't want to have to like build a whole new server. I don't want to have to like figure out all of these like remoting protocols. And so we're going to jump in and do a demo about Windows Subsystem for Linux. And so this is something that I would recommend that you only do in a lab environment to get comfortable with kind of a new way of management. There are there's Ansible Automation, which is their cloud version that you can use. So that would be more enterprise. But to get started, we're going to use Windows Subsystem for Linux. To this. Okay, so I've got this VM set up for us, and then we will walk through getting yourself configured. Sorry, I'm cheating and going to pull up my installation. And so we're going to start off with just git config. Mind.
I see a ping asking about screen share, but I see it. So
Yeah, I see it.
You can see it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second.
Shane, you're just special if you can't see the screen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I did. Right. I'm actually going to pop over. I had already set all of this up on another VM. So we're going to just jump in more to how you would use it already, because I'm missing a few steps on that. So 1 second. Okay, So rather than us having to watch me for a million years, so I have all of this documented on my blog post on this, but to get WSL open, I'm just going to open Ubuntu on via terminal, and then I'm just going to list out our directories. This I have a demo. One item to point out is it is case sensitive, and I did that after, and then I would recommend using VS Code. So how I'm going to launch that, I'm just going to do code and then stop. All right. All right, so I'm going to walk through some of the kind of the configurations that I did to make WSL work properly with Ansible, because that was a little bit unique and took quite a bit of time to figure out for me with having zero exposure. So the first thing is I did some of these settings of just file association. So hosts, those are going to be INI files. Ansible is going to be using .yaml, and then the default language for Ansible, and then what terminal settings I was going to choose. So let's see here. This is kind of some of the steps that I would have gone through and shown everybody, but this is all on GitHub as well, so we can walk through that easily. But I'll just kind of explain what's happening is you're setting your git config. So the reason mine didn't work properly is because I didn't install git before doing this. I have git set up on this machine, but I didn't do, that was the one step I didn't set. So after you set your username and email, all you do is run these icons. Sorry, I'm getting stuck. You're going to run all of these commands. So one of the elements that was really challenging with WSL was there were some permission issues that were happening where Ansible was unable to read the host files. And so what would happen is it would throw this error that it would say that it couldn't find these host files. And the reason why is on WSL, the permission structure, because you're basically mounting it on your C drive, you're not actually changing the Linux permissions. And so they're kind of fighting. And if you try to run, how do I set these permissions? It's not going to work. So after quite a bit of digging, I found Jeremy Murrah's 2019 session that he did at the DevOps Global Summit. And he walked through the exact same issue that I had. He did a great job documenting it, but I grabbed his links, put them in here, and then also put his notes. So after setting all of these permissions and updating the metadata, then all of a sudden it's going to work great. No, and I had no issue after that. One huge sticking point with Linux is when I was trying to set these permissions, because I wasn't using VS Code, I couldn't figure out how to save the file. So I would have terminal open, and I was like, how do I could open the file, but then I was like, how do I save it? And I couldn't find anything online. Maybe my Google foo wasn't that great. I would watch these YouTube videos and people are like, here you go. I'm like, okay, well, what keystrokes did they do? And I'm like trying to do it again. I'm pinging my coworker, how do I save the file? He's like, well, save the file, Hailey. I'm like, that's super cool, but like, how do I save the file? And so the easiest way that I found is just using nano. And so I would just run like sudo nano. I don't have to do that because I have VS Code open, but this is a huge reason of why I'm recommending VS Code, because now you can finally just hit file and save. So most of the configs I would recommend just running in VS Code instead of any other options like using VI, because everything is a lot harder to do that way. All right. Okay, so those permission issues, I can't unfortunately replicate because I didn't have Git downloaded on my other VM. Otherwise, I would walk you all through that. I do have screenshots, but here we are. So that's the basic. And then I'll just go through quickly just the kind of the file structure with Ansible. We've got our config file. This is mostly just to kind of walk everyone through how you would, which commands you would run. This is for later. This is a YAML file for Azure Arc enrollment. And then this is a YAML file for Chocolatey. We'll cover that in a minute. And then this is a requirements document or requirements file. So that way, when I'm running a playbook, it knows specifically, hey, I need to make sure that I have those specific plugins configured. And then now we'll need to kind of go back and talk about, well, how do I even get the communication set up between my server and Ansible? So this script is from Ansible's GitHub, and all it does is just configure remoting on the server. So again, because this is a lab, this isn't the most secure method at all. There's significantly more secure methods. You can use Ansible's Key Vault. You can use Azure Key Vault. There's lots of different vault mechanisms that you can use, but because we're in a lab environment, we're just going to kind of have basic authentication. All right, so now the piece of enrolling the server, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my other VM that I had set up. All right. As you can see, I have an Ansible user account, and that's just, it's part of the local admins group, and that's going to be the user account and password that I'm going to use for Ansible to run. All I did earlier before coming to this demo is I just ran that PowerShell script on here that I just showed you all. Very basic, very easy. All right, and then now to actually run actions on the server. So I'm going to just show you just really quickly before, so you can just see that we don't have anything on the server. So all I have is Microsoft Edge. I don't have the Azure Arc agent. I don't have anything on here. So that way we can see kind of how quickly all of this runs. So jumping back over to my VM that does have WSL on it, let me make it slightly smaller. When we go into VS Code, I have my host files here, and these are just simple variables on here. Oh, I do realize I need to put in my other server. So we can do that. And then this Ansible host, that's a variable that I'm setting right now. And then let me go grab my IP address on this one because I forgot. Yep. Okay. So probably I didn't cover, but the connection that Ansible uses with Windows is WinRM. So that's something that we're all familiar with. So if I had set up Ansible Key Vault, I would be using a certificate, and I would have, much tighter authentication on here. But I just wanted to kind of show how quickly and easily you can get all of this set up. And then I have my secrets right here. I only put the user account in here because I'm going to just type in the password as we go along. And then so the piece that is just kind of blew my mind is all I had to do was run that configuration, or run that configure Ansible, and then now I don't have to do anything else on the host. I have everything set on this side. This is my configuration file. I have the hosts. This is going to be all of the hosts. That's going to be all 4 of those. The gather facts step, what that does is it goes out to the host and collects facts from it. And you can then later dynamically apply those. So you can find out, is this a SQL server? Does this have IIS? Like what versions of things? So the options that you can do with those facts are a little bit endless, but we're going to kind of keep it on a less complex side. I have the variables, which I had set in my host file. And then I'm going to install Chocolatey. And that's from the Ansible documentation. This is what the module is called. It's chocolatey.win_chocolatey. It's a bit of a mouthful. One item I want to call out is that whenever you're looking at anything managing Windows-wise from Ansible, it all starts with a win in front of it. So I hung myself up quite a few times by trying to run commands that were not Windows specific. So wanted to call that out. And so what we're going to do is this module will get installed on that server. Then these specific applications, I just picked a couple easy ones. And then it's going to update them to make sure that they are the latest. I'm just going to create a temp file, and then I'm just going to update remote registry. So how we're going to run that is we're going to do Ansible. It'd be cool if I could type. All right, Ansible dash playbook. And then I'm going to do -I. So that means inventory. So where are these hosts that I'm pulling from? So they're going to be in my group -vars folder, and they're going to be hosts. And then the name of the playbook. And it's the playbook that we're in. So we're going to just do playbook.windows.yaml. And then I'm going to have it ask the password. So that way I don't have to keep it in the file. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to type in the password for the Ansible user account. I'm going to hit enter. And then this is the part that is pretty cool, is you're getting a play-by-play of every single thing that's happening. As you can see, it's gathering the facts. So that shows that it does have successful communication with the newest server that I just enrolled, which is the Northwest Chicago 2. We're also finding out that Chocolatey was missing from this specific server. It was okay on all of the rest of them. And now it's going to be installing all of these base applications. The part that going back to that whole declarative thing, what's really nice is, say, for instance, you have systems where some are in the desired state that you want. You don't have to worry about them running these jobs on them and then wasting resources. It's only going to apply to devices that are not in the state that you specified.
Hailey, to that
Yeah.
end, if you ran this and everything was fine, it would just finish, right? Like nothing would happen and it wouldn't break anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I have done that quite a few times and have torn things down quite a few times just to double check. Yeah. So now we've updated these, we've installed those applications, created the temp folder. So now I'm going to pop back over there just to show you how quickly that all happened. So now if we go look at these applications, there they all are. And then we've got the temp folder. So that I didn't do anything exciting with the Chocolatey application. With Chocolatey apps, you can make them significantly more complex. You can add specific configurations, all kinds of things to them. I haven't done anything with that specifically for this demo, but there's a lot that you can do. And then now about like enrolling into Azure Arc, it is the exact same steps as previously when you are creating the Azure Arc resource. So say for instance, or the enrollment profile, if I go to add a machine, and we're going to do the multi-servers where you click generate a script, you would pick, your subscription, your resource group. I'm just going to kind of walk through this kind of quickly. This isn't anything groundbreaking, but just to show how easy it is to choose. I'm going to pick and check the SQL, and then my service principal. I'm going to skip through a bit of this because we've been here and done this before, but the deployment method is just Ansible. And so it looks very similar to all of the other scripts. The only difference is it's written in YAML. Another thing that you can do is say, for instance, you don't want to go back into the Azure portal and redo this, the script. You can also just run it as a PowerShell script. And so you can reuse that. So, all right. So I'm going to show the enrollment into Azure Arc, but using Ansible this time. So as we can see, I've already have one, those service principals and stuff. You guys are welcome to try to use it. But yeah, it's going to be just the exact same as before. It's going to be Ansible playbook. And then we're going to do -I for the inventory, and then where the host file is, and that's going to be right here. And then just to talk through that again, you're saying what you want Ansible to do. You want Ansible to run a playbook. The I for inventory, where do those hosts live? It's in that folder, the group.var/host, and then the name of the playbook, which is arc-onboard YAML, and then after the password. And then I'm going to run that password again. Now, if I had set up Ansible Vault, I could dynamically assign encrypted credentials, and so then I would never have to run this piece. It would just run. So now it's going to gather whether or not they are Windows or Linux servers. And as you can see, it's just immediately skipping for Linux servers because they're not. And it's showing it's changing for the Windows server. And it's installing, and so I'm going to let this continue. And it's connecting it. I'm going to pop back over here so we can see, and then the agent is already here. And so that's how quickly it shows up. So one of the things, aside from Ansible being agentless, is how quickly it runs. And then when we're seeing these outputs, how quickly you can see that logging. And I didn't have to do anything to create this logging as it's going through. So that just makes, to me, it's significantly easier as I'm going through and running changes on systems. All right, and then I'll go pop into the portal so you can see it is there. And I'm going to hit refresh. It is. Right, and then let's show you. I'm going to kind of walk through a little bit some of the Ansible documentation, just so I can show you that it is a lot easier than it seems. So I've been here quite a few times, but I'm going to go to the Chocolatey repository. So when there's applications that you want to use, there is one thing that's nice about using Ansible is you have access to the entire Chocolatey repository, which I think has like 9,000 apps. And then you're not having to host any of those yourselves. So if there is Chocolatey for Business where you would have to set up a repository and you could have your own internal repository that then you could then call those apps to your servers. But for most cases, at least to get started using Ansible and playing around with all of the ways that you would install applications, I find that just using the open source repository a lot easier. There's all of the parameters are documented. It's all been very easy to follow. And then I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom of the config settings as well. And then I love that there's an example of how you could make all your playbooks. So it's pretty easy. It's also very human readable. And so as you're going through, if I handed this off to like somebody on my service desk, that's going to be really easy for them to read and know exactly what's going on. All right, I'm installing Git. This is what the module is. This is the name. And this is the status that I want it to have. I want it to be present. Right. Jump back to. I kind of skipped through the server enrollment slide. And after demo. Okay. So I put in the slide deck a little bit of the documentation, but specifically the Ansible community documentation with Ansible, which just showed. Very robust. There's several contributors. Josh King, I put him and his videos linked as well on my blog post, but he goes really in depth covering all of the things that you can do with Chocolatey, whether it's an internal repo or if you're using just the open source repo that everyone has access to. But the big takeaway though is even without exposure to Linux or even some of the experience with Python, there are very simple tools that you can use that are lightweight and easy to manage a desired state for your servers. So that way you can start getting off of Config Manager. But that is where I will take a pause because I kind of just like word vomited all of that. If anybody has any questions, because I kind of lightning round that a bit.
If we get people off of Configuration Manager, then we have to rename the user group.
That's fair.
System Center is getting a little long in the tooth, but it's still around.
I don't have any System Center in my environment.
Yeah, we could just be systems management and live forever. So at least, yeah. I mean, the other thing, right, with all this with Ansible is that it's all text. So I think it ties very well to Git in the future and, other conversations, right? So storing your playbooks there and things like that is a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, it's also like to start getting comfortable with like Azure DevOps and like moving a lot more of the management into Azure, because I mean, that's really the direction that we're all trying to go. And then having an option where you're not having to learn everything DevOps, you can reuse everything that you already have and just run it significantly faster and easier. So, and then also being able to have, version controlling is huge. So, I know quite a few people who use GitHub and they have source controlling with that, or GitLab, and you have all your playbooks checked in, and in order for you to run them, you have to merge requests. All of that is really, because to your point earlier, Matt, about task sequences, if somebody else has changed it or something, well, now we have this very well documented of who made changes. So anyway, that is kind of the beginning into managing cloud completely from the cloud.
And I think the statefulness of it is nice as well, right? I mean, I think behind the scenes, right, it basically does test, like even like when you install a Chocolatey package, if you're saying install 7-zip, there's a test to see if it's already there, and if so, then it just skips it basically.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and which is nice. So if you have like thousands of machines, like so say for instance, like with CrowdStrike or any of these issues, if I'm running a Ansible playbook that has all of these steps, if there's devices that already have the remediation fixed already applied, it's not going to run it on there.
Do no harm, basically.
Yeah.
So in the YAML,
Yeah.
I assume it has the traditional YAML issues of very specific spacing and if you run in, can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a good call out. That is another reason why I was using VS Code. So as I was working on this demo and playing around with it, the amount of times that as you can see, YAML is upset with this because there's spacing. What I find annoying with it is I'm a fan of tab, not spaces. And what is really helpful with VS Code is it does all of that for you and knows how to properly apply it. So I had been messing around with some of my playbooks outside of VS Code before this, and I multiple times couldn't quite tell if I had everything lined up exactly. So if I go to run this, as you can see, and just move the host one over, that's completely broken. If I go to run this, and I'll just run this to show you kind of the error message that Ansible is going to throw me, which I've gotten pretty familiar with just because I've messed it up quite a few times. Oh, great. Of course it's going to work because I didn't hit save, so it doesn't see it. So hold on, because I was going to show you the error. But what I do like, I mean, even though getting used to YAML has been a little bit of a challenge with kind of these like sensitivities, it'll tell you exactly where the problem is. So once this finishes running, I will show you exactly where the problem is. So 1 second. All right. So now I'm going to hit save. Then we're going to do it. So it's telling me immediately where it's not working. And then it tells me it's right here. So it literally points out, hey, the problem is at the hosts all. This is where the offending line is. And I can go, oh, that's the problem. Oh, look, it's happy now. And so then if I hit save again and I run it again, it's going to work. But so yeah, the YAML piece is a bit annoying, just getting used to it. But the other nice thing that is you can also run JSON and everything in Ansible as well. It doesn't matter. You can set up your outputs to be JSON for like specific settings. I haven't messed around with that as much, but that's one of the next iterations of demo that I want to cover because of how much in Azure is JSON. So it's nice that all of the skills that you're building in Azure, it's the exact same ones here. So you're not having to like build all of these fringe skills and then trying to call them, but only have them for one specific use case. Yeah. Yeah. No,
This is intentional.
no, that's
Mine was totally intentional.
Yeah. No, you're totally fine. Yeah. But yeah, so there's so much that you can do with Ansible, and there's a ton of documentation. Even the Microsoft documentation has Ansible built in. Like if you look at like Azure, some of the Azure Arc stuff is directly, let me see. And there's a whole collection of playbooks as well of how you can run these Ansible playbooks. Like you could literally just go grab this playbook and input your own. That's one thing that I did. I tested it out by making the specific Ansible playbook from the Azure portal, and then I also tried it just this one, and both work. So, and then running it, Microsoft even gives you exactly how you can run the playbook. But yeah, this is just kind of a shorter version of it. There's a lot more complexity that you can run. Like another thing that I didn't talk about is you can set network configurations. You can, like our network team, they are now using Ansible for all of their configs and changes because it has source control. But so you could build an entire lab with Ansible where you're calling out specific pieces of, hey, configure my network this way, then, you know, set up my VMs, then join them to the domain. There's so much that you can do with it, but I really just wanted to address the big issue that I kept seeing people talking about was, what do I do with third-party apps? What do I do if I want to change registry keys? What do I do if I want to add users? How do I do that? Because Azure Arc, you know, is not a desired state tool. So anyway.
For fun, I just threw a couple things in ChatGPT to create an Ansible script, and it actually didn't do bad. So in YAML, YAML was YAML was not as hard
at least to get used to. So I kind of cheated. I use YAML all the time in Obsidian as a note-taking app. And so I was already pretty comfortable with it, except for when I came over and realized that I was still messing up my configs by having a tab instead where I shouldn't. So.
Okay, this maybe gets into some different weeds, but
Yeah.
You installed stuff,
Yes.
latest stuff.
Mhm.
What if you need to lock into a specific version for some reason? Is that a chocolatey thing, or is that more of an Ansible thing?
So it depends. So the Ansible piece is would be like calling those specific settings and the specific module. So if it is an application and you're installing it from Chocolatey, that would be something that you would call to that specific Chocolatey module. So that's kind of how it's broken out is if there is, it would just depend on what module or what specific thing you're trying to change. So, but yeah, you can lock it into a specific, say, application version or, like for instance, your download URL, like all of that stuff you can customize. So as long as it can get to that URL, it'll do it. So yeah, it's a lot more powerful than I have even been able to unlock yet. So yeah. Would have been cool if I would have installed Git so we could all just sit and watch it download. As I did that, I was like, I knew there was gonna be something I forgot, and I like ran through all this stuff and had Matt look at it, and he's like, "Oh, this looks great." And then here we go. I'm like,
Step
all right.
one.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
maybe 0.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was like, I should keep this other one that I know already works. So anyway, yeah.
Good.
That's a short version of it. So, but if you want, I'll just show on screen just kind of all the steps that I put on my blog, just because I talked through all of it, of all of the direct links to the playbook, talked about exactly all of the steps that you need to go through, all of the links, just because a lot of it was even just for my own documentation of, oh, at what point did I forget, here's screenshots of installing it. And that's how I was like, oh, I needed to install Git first. And the documentation on installing Git is pretty dang easy. And so I didn't put a screenshot of that. So anyway, but yeah, that's step one with getting started with Ansible. So.